which is really needing attention and of all of us as global citizens. So presentation outline, I will give you a quick introduction of what this is all about, the net zero carbon emission economy, and then low carbon energy pathway, which we have to deal with. And then, I I will talk about new energy policy from the Asian Development Bank viewpoint, because that sets the tone for international financing in the years to come. And then implications of this new energy policy, I will go into details, and then few final remarks, and to end the presentation. So if you look at net zero carbon emissions, this is important because by 2050, because this is the only way that we will be able to keep the global temperature rise within 1.5 degree target. This is very important because I don't have to tell you all of you know what it means, temperature rise for the global environment. And if it goes beyond 1.5, it will have very serious repercussions. So for years, the world community has been trying to keep the 1.5 degree target, the global temperature rise within that target. For that, we need to have our economies reaching net zero carbon emissions on average roughly in the region of 2050, which means as good global citizens, we have a duty towards this, our contributions towards this target. So this has been pledged by 137 countries so far. It may increase by COP26 or during COP26 in Glasgow. This might even increase beyond that. And this includes, most importantly, China, which has declared that their intention of reaching this target by 2060. And of course, this covers 70% of the global emissions, these 137 countries. Of course, up to now, India has not pledged when it's going to reach the net zero emission target, but I'm sure India is seriously looking at it too, because India and China are the biggest economies in this region. And as you know, what we do in Asia and the Pacific will decide how we are going to go about this within the next few decades, because Asia Pacific region is the biggest emitter of GHGs during the next few decades. So important thing is that this is the pledge by 137 countries, no adequate policies to reach carbon dioxide emissions to net zero by 2050. We have pledges, but if you look at the strategies, they are not adequate to reach that target. And if that is the case, there is no chance of limiting global temperature rise to about 1.5 degree centigrade. However, if you look at the current trend, it can reach to something around 2 degree centigrade, and in fact, some estimates say it can be as high as about 3.5 degrees Celsius by 2100, which is going to be have disastrous impact on the global climate, and as a result, Asia and the Pacific region will suffer most, as you could see in recent floods, droughts, and so on in the region. And what this means is that the path net zero emissions is quite narrow. We will not have very many options to deal with if you want to reach a net zero carbon emissions, and that requires large-scale deployment of clean energy technologies. Now itself, we cannot wait until such a period to do that. And renewable energies, it's not just renewable energy, but transport, which is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to GHG emissions. You have to move into electric vehicles. And what it means is that electric vehicles will have to be powered with green energy, green power, and then energy efficiency in building retrofits, because buildings consume quite a lot of energy, as you know, through air conditioning, lighting, and other heating, depending on the climate you are in. So it has got to have efficient building retrofits. And then what it says is that this is equivalent to installing the world's largest solar park roughly every day. Now, at the moment, I think one of the biggest solar parks in the world is in Asia, in India, Badla Solar Park, which is roughly around 2.7 gigawatts, if I can remember right. And that's something which, of course, Asian Development Bank supported at the beginning. So that means such a solar park should come into place every day, in the future. So this means, roughly it is estimated the numbers and these facts and figures I'm going to bring are the estimates from International Energy Agency. They are not mine, but of course, International Energy Agency has done a lot of research on this, and this is what it says. It needs roughly the world need to increase its investments by 2030 to about $4 trillion. That's not a small amount of money to come by when it comes to available financing in the world. And we need to have roughly around 630 gigawatts of solar or 300 gigawatts of wind power by 2030 coming every year. And electric vehicle sales, now at the moment it is estimated roughly about 5% at the moment of the car sales today. And it has got to take up a market share of about 60% by 2030. And the most importantly, the energy intensity in the economies, the amount of energy used per unit of gross domestic product will have to improve by 4% every year. Not just 1 or 2 years, every year we will have to improve that. And it is estimated that the global economy will be larger by 40% compared to what we have today. But energy use should be 7% less. You can see the enormity of the task ahead of us when it comes to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. But of course, low carbon growth brings benefits. It's not just everybody talks about the cost of bringing low carbon growth, but it has lots of benefits coming along with it. That's why we need to concentrate on the benefit side, because that is the justification, of course, the climate change. But along with it, if there are other benefits, that's what we need to use to justify these things, particularly in countries like ours, which basically are not big emitters, but still suffering from some of these climate change issues, but at the same time needs a local justification of such interventions. And increase in clean energy investments bring jobs and growth. You may have already seen it in Sri Lanka with the growth in the renewable energy industry. And to reach net zero emissions, as I said, you need so much of solar in the installations, and electric vehicle sales and intensity improved by 4% every year. And this will create millions of new jobs. Most important thing is that these new jobs can come locally, and also even within countries in the local regions. If you look at, for instance, development of microhydros, the jobs will come in those remote areas. Solar, if you have installations in remote areas, the jobs will come in those regions. So this is very important. Even within an economy, these jobs will come in a decentralized manner. And that helps the economy, that helps the countries when it comes to growth. So as a result, significantly lift global economic growth and the local economies, most importantly, even within countries' local economies. And also this emphasis will improve the chances of accessing, reaching universal access to electricity. And because of the nature of renewable energy and the decentralized nature of it, it's easier to achieve this universal access with renewable energy, and it benefits rural and the poor, as we know, underprivileged classes. And that's another very important benefit which we reap from low carbon growth. And then clean cooking worldwide by 2030. Now, as you know, the situation with regard to electricity is not as bad as the situation in relation to cooking. And almost 2 billion people in the world still use cooking technologies which are not as clean. And we have a duty towards this population to bring clean cooking, and the low carbon growth will eventually help to bring clean cooking to majority of the people in the world. And most of the CO2 reductions come through 2030 from, it is estimated, technology is already commercially available. About 50% of that will have to come from, the technology is already available. But the emphasis needs to continue on innovation, because it is estimated most of the rest of the emission reductions will have to come technologies which are not yet commercially available, which are still pilot scale, and which are still under demonstration, and these will have to continue the innovation, the piloting, testing, and to bring them to commercialization, so that eventually those technologies will be able to bring in the contribution to low carbon growth. So innovation, we will have to continue to innovate. So we cannot forget it and say that the technologies are good enough for us to move to the low carbon growth and to reach a zero emission economies. No, we have to continue to invest in innovation. That's where the academic communities have a big role to play when it comes to innovation, and also industry academy collaboration. They have a huge role to play in this regard. And research and development is very critical, as I said. And at the moment, 90 billion of public funds needs to be mobilized. At the moment, we have only about 20 billion today, and that's not good enough. So which means even countries like us, with all the cash-strapped institutions, still we should think of spending money on innovation and research. And obviously, we have to shift away from fossil fuels. And net zero means we have to have huge declines in the use of coal, oil, and gas. And this is not just one or two countries, but the whole global community will have to work towards this. Whether we like it or not, that's how it's going to be if you want to save the world. And this requires halting sales of new internal combustion passenger cars by 2035. That is the estimate. I'm not saying this. This is the prediction, the forecast from International Energy Agency. So you can imagine the enormity of the task. And then phasing out all unabated coal and oil power plants by 2040. By that time, we should not have coal. We should not have oil-fired power stations anymore by 2040, which means if you are going to invest on coal and oil-based assets at the moment, you should think of the cost of stranded assets, if that is the case by that time. And because we are already only 19 years behind in this regard. And so if you want to invest now, you have to think of what will happen to these power plants by 2040 if the world community's ambition is to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And that means we have to immediately stop new oil and gas fields, no extension to coal mines, and no new mines. That's what it says. So when it comes to transport, people, it's all people-centered and multiple impacts on people's lives. Transport, heating, and cooking, as I said, and urban planning and jobs. And 30 million, because all these will have to come together. We cannot, have an intervention, standalone interventions. It's all cross-sectoral. We have to have proper urban planning and proper transport and heating and cooking requirements for the communities around. And 30 million jobs created, it is estimated, because of this. But at the moment, at the same time, of course, about 5 million jobs lost because of the shutting down of these conventional power plants and so on. And this is why we call, we have to have a just transition. The transition from this polluting the fossil fuel based economies to clean energy based economies. You need to have a just transition. People will have to be looked after. The economies will have to be looked after, which means we have to bring in concessionary financing from richer countries. We have to bring in grant financing. We have to find ways and means of supporting these communities which are affected by this transition. And interestingly, consumer choices can lead to as much as 55% of the cumulative emission reductions. It's quite interesting. And you and I, what we decide will determine 55% of the emission reductions in the future. Purchasing of an electric vehicle, Of course, I myself has an internal combustion engine based car, but I have to, if I'm going to invest, I have to think of an electric vehicle. That choice will determine about 55% of the emission reductions in the future. Retrofitting a house with energy efficient technologies. When you buy an electric lamp, when you buy a household appliance, you should think of energy efficient technologies so that you contribute towards this 55%. And the behavioral changes. If replacing car trips with walking, wherever, if you want to go to the town, which is at a walking distance, probably you walk rather than taking the car and stop and block the roads and sidewalks. And then cycling if possible. It's easier to say these things than done, but it's important that you should try. Public transport, we should invest on public transport so that you have less passenger vehicles, private vehicles on the roads. Therefore, by saving that will eventually save fuel. And then minimizing long haul flights. And if you want to reduce, now for instance these days because of COVID, we work from home, I work from home. If I were to be in Manila, I would have been doing so many missions to South Asia from there, and which obviously end up with so much of emissions because of flights. And now that I am sitting at home and no trips, and that will save the world in that sense. So that contribution will have to come from us. So individual choices will eventually decide 55% of the cumulative emission reductions in the future. This is quite enormous, significant in terms of overall contribution. And the other most important thing is that we talk of all sorts of energy sources like biomass, petroleum-based fuels like gas and everything, liquid fuels, and then LPG and then natural gas and so on and so forth. But eventually, when it comes to the final energy use, electricity will have to play a major role in this transition. That means about 50% of the the energy use will have to come from electricity if you are to be on course towards this net zero emission targets. Key role across all sectors in the economy. Transport, as I said, electric vehicles, industries. Most of the industries rely on obviously other fuels, but it's time that wherever it's possible to bring electricity, green electricity to the industries. Commercial enterprises, as much as possible, electricity, green electricity to households is the same story. Reduce fossil fuels as much as possible as the end-use energy source. Electricity generation needs to reach net zero emissions globally by 2040. So that's what it says. That means electricity generation should not have any fossil fuels by 2040 at all. So when, as a country, even in Sri Lanka as a country, we should think of these things when we try to plan our generation systems, when we plan our overall energy sector interventions. Supplying almost half of total energy consumption, as I said, electricity is the key, is at the center, and requires huge increases in electricity system flexibility. It's not easy to do this. And even today I was talking to some of my former colleagues and colleagues now, even the electricity board. It's important that we invest on electric system flexibility if we are to do this. We cannot basically disregard that we cannot do this and therefore we have to stay as it is. No, as we are. No, we have to improve the system flexibility to accommodate these changes. The batteries, the demand response, hydrogen-based fuels, hydropower, and more to ensure reliable supplies. So we should think of this whole challenge as an integrated challenge, and integrated solution will have integrated solutions will have to be brought in to address these challenges. And power system flexibility is absolutely important if we are to move forward, and therefore we have to find ways and means of bringing in the technologies we need to ensure that. And time for low emission industries. Electricity industry is only one thing, and then when it comes to other industries, the industrial sector will have to think of new technologies, and by 2045 these technologies will have to take over. As I said, vast majority of the cars will have to run on electricity or fuel cells. Fuel cells based on hydrogen, something like hydrogen coming from green sources. So it should be green hydrogen or blue hydrogen. And planes to rely on advanced fuels, and biofuels and synthetic fuels, and industrial plants to use carbon capture and or hydrogen. And as you know, carbon capture and storage, carbon capture and utilization and storage will have a major role to play in the years to come. If you are going to use continue to use fossil fuels, it will have to be carbon neutral eventually, and or hydrogen. And achieving it, then complete transformation of the energy system is required, as I largely dominated by renewables. And in fact, in this scenario, solar, the single largest source of supply, will be the single largest source of supply. So from our side also, therefore, we have to plan for it, and require strong focus from all stakeholders. It's not just the consumer, it's not just the solar or wind developers will have to come into are critical here. It's the utilities like Electricity Board, Lanka Transformers, Lanka Electricity Company, and so on. And all these different stakeholders will have to come together and work together and try to bring in solutions, contributions from their own ways. And greater international cooperation is required. It's not just one country alone. You'll have to transfer funds from richer countries to not so rich countries, and constitutional resources will have to come to support the just transition will have to be supported. Therefore, supporting developing economies with financial and technology needs, technology transfer, all that is required if we are to achieve this. Moving forward, as I said, no new oil and gas fire by 2040, and no coal mines, no unabated coal power plants now on, and by 2030, this is how the scenario is going to be. Of course, my being from Asian Development Bank and of also international financing institution, international financing will have a extremely important role to play, like what ADB does. So I will quickly go into ADB's strategy, policy and strategy towards energy, energy in the years to come. And we recognize the central role energy has to play, and equitable and inclusive social and economic development, and we focus on that. And primary objective, energy sector operations to help developing member countries. People might think that the World Bank and ADB, they are looking after their major shareholders like the developed countries. No, our primary objective is to help our developing member countries to accelerate development of sustainable, resilient energy systems, and also to provide reliable and affordable access, foster inclusive growth. That's very important. And as far as ADB is concerned, we have already declared that 100% of our operations will be Paris aligned or aligned with the Paris Agreement 2015. And it might even be stronger after COP26 this year. And non-sovereign operations, that means private sector operations in ADB, 85% aligned with Paris Agreement by 2023, and then by 2025 fully aligned. So these are our commitments, and we will work towards. And we recently came up with our policy. Just last week, actually, we approved our policy, ADB New Energy Policy, after almost 11 years. And this policy will be reviewed in 5 years. That's the plan. And this is very much forward-looking policy. And as I said, we are there to help the DMCs foster economic growth and social development, and of course, keep in mind a low carbon transition in the Asia-Pacific region. And we have recognized the sector needs financing across the region considerably exceed the sector support provided by ADB. ADB provides roughly about $30 billion a year, with co-financing maybe another $20 billion, put together about $50 billion a year. And that's not good enough to support the needs in the region. And we have to therefore prioritize what we are going to support in and tackle the most demanding energy challenges. So we have 5 policy principles in this policy that we support, of course, affordable and reliable energy to DMCs to eradicate poverty and social inequalities. And at the same time, we emphasize on tackling climate change. That's very important. It's as important as providing reliable energy to our DMCs. And of course, this needs institutional development. We have to ensure the institutions working in the energy sector can perform this task, are up to the mark to deliver this requirement at the end. And then we need to promote regional cooperation, because we cannot sit alone as a single country, or for that matter, even as a sub-region or a region. We have to have cooperation everywhere, regional and global cooperation, interregional, intra-regional cooperation is required to strengthen energy security and increase cross-border access and eventually cleaner energy sources. And for instance, if we have Sri Lanka has an connection with India, we can produce more clean energy over here and ship it out. At the same time, we can bring from of India, which can produce a lot of clean energy, wind and solar. We can bring it here when required to harness the maximum benefits of clean energy. And we have to combine finance, knowledge, partnerships, and country-focused approach, because one particular subsector cannot stand alone. We have to combine all this to provide integrated solutions to eventually address these challenges in the energy sector. So what this means is support a transition to sustainable low carbon growth, energy efficiency, and then renewable energy, strategic decarbonization. And these are important things, but I was just talking about. I don't have to reiterate this. And what this means is that we will not support upstream, midstream oil projects and limit downstream oil support. Coal mining, processing, storage, transportation, no support. Financing and investments in nuclear energy, no support. And natural gas exploration drilling activities, no support. So that's very important to remember this as an international financing institution. This is our strategy, and this will not be very different in other financing institutions. And we will be very selective when it comes to midstream and downstream natural gas support, and directly impacts greenfield gas sector investments. Implications, as I said, very little support for oil and gas, and support largely concentrated on decommissioning on currently operating fossil fuel-based plants. In fact, ADB will be announcing what you call energy transition mechanism in COP26, where we will put in money and also leverage money from other philanthropies and other co-financiers, other countries, bilaterals, to support coal decommissioning. We are going to pilot test this into countries, and it will be expanded into other countries, and that's called energy transition mechanism, advanced decommissioning of coal power plants. And that's something which we will be supporting. And then renewable energy, energy efficiency, transmission and distribution to help renewable energy and energy efficiency and flexibility in transmission systems, innovative technologies, and support for natural gas as a transitional fuel, as I said, but very limited, and innovative business models and financing. Because when it comes to financing, don't expect the state or the international financing institutions to support all this. It's impossible. The needs in the energy sector are enormous, and we really need private sector financing. Don't believe if somebody says that in state sector in Sri Lanka can do everything to invest. No, it's impossible. You really need to leverage private sector financing if you really need, if you are to satisfy the energy needs in this country, and in any country for that matter. We have to plan for low carbon development, and we will support nationally determined contributions and to be more ambitious towards climate targets. And I don't have to go into this. Energy sector will have to be electricity sector overall will have to be looked into as something which provides cross-sectoral support. It's not just electricity sector itself. It has its own implications in all the other sectors. And when we try to find solutions, we have to think of all the other sectors together and provide integrated solutions, not just energy sector in a cell and trying to solve energy sector issues. And our interventions, as I said, put together about 31 billion last year, and of course another 20 billion or so in co-financing and leveraging, so about 50 billion put together. And climate financing is more or less roughly in the region of about $5 billion a year, and that will have to increase to about 8 billion a year, because we have now increased the target to 100 billion cumulatively by 2030. That's our target we are working towards. So we'll be aligning our operations with Paris Agreement, and as I said, and then enhance investments in adaptation and resilience. That's important. And then a holistic approach to all these investments. Few final remarks. I always say, as developing member countries, we have to leapfrog. Don't think of going along the same path as all the other developed countries or advanced countries have gone through. Don't say that, so and so went through this cycle and went through coal, gas, and then they came into renewable energy. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. If you can remember, when we went on, getting our television, we did not go into black and white transmission and then came to a color transmission. We ended up getting color transmission straight away when some other countries had been already only on black and white transmission. We have to leapfrog. When it comes to technology, we have to leapfrog. So therefore, keep that in mind when we try to have energy sector interventions and solutions for low carbon growth. MDBs like ADB will continue to play a major role. We will play a major role. We will be one of the biggest contributors to energy sector development in countries like Sri Lanka. We will continue to do that. And it is up to these countries to get the maximum out of our support. And financing will focus to shift away from traditional areas. As I said, we will not be financing traditional areas of interventions because we need to add value, and we need to ensure that eventually it's low carbon path. And new and innovative technologies approaches to take over. That's how we are going to move forward in the future. And sovereign financing to be used, maximize leveraging private sector finance. As I said, you need enormous amount of private sector financing that can be done only using sovereign financing to leverage them. And because sovereign financing will have a role to play. And that role is to leverage as much as possible financing from other sources, private sector as much as possible. And of course, increased knowledge contribution. One of our major tasks is to bring in the new technologies, bringing technology transfer, bringing experience in other regions so that the countries can benefit from these lessons and these experiences. So that's our contribution as a development partner in the region. So in that regard, we will pilot new technologies, business models, and support adoption of such things. And also, we understand that developing countries had minimal contribution in the past to carbon dioxide emissions, but that's not an excuse. But we suffer most. If you look at the region, we suffer most. Even today in Sri Lanka, the frequency of floods, frequency of droughts have increased enormously from compared to the time when we were small. You know that. And we are the people who suffer most. So which means together we need to confront this challenge. We cannot basically attribute everything to the past and the developed countries and then shut ourselves off from the solutions. We should do our part, and particularly Sri Lanka as an upper middle income country, we have to contribute and we have to do our part. And we have to contribute to the body of knowledge to enlighten the policymakers, to all other stakeholders. Stakeholders should not be sitting on a corner and try to promote their own ideas. No, we have to understand other stakeholders. We have to, as consumers, we have to understand the Ceylon Electricity Board or Lanka Electricity Company, why they can't do certain things and how they can be encouraged to do certain things the way we would like them to do. And at the same time, the utilities will have to understand the consumer's viewpoint and the other investors' viewpoint. And we have to work together as a single group to confront these challenges and eventually helping the country, helping the region and the global economy, global environment. And we need a paradigm shift for this, shift away from relying on status quo. Don't think that this is how we have been operating and therefore we have to continue and improve on this. No, think of disruptive interventions so that things can change, shift away from a big paradigm shift in the whole thing. We should not continue to say that we cannot do so much of clean energy because the system cannot absorb. Let's find a way to do it, and let's find the technologies to do it. Let's find the ways and means of changing behavioral changes to accommodate more and more renewable energy. So let's try to do that and learn lessons from around, and don't just think that this is the way we are doing, therefore we'll have to continue this way. Look at others and see how they have done, and let's move on and find our own solutions to contribute. I think this is where I would like to stop. Thank you very much. Once again, I would really apologize for being late in connecting and all these technology hiccups. these things happen, and I hope you could bear with me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Professor Wijayatunga. I take this opportunity to ask the audience if there are any questions. Actually, there are a few questions in the chat box, but still, if anybody wants to talk directly, can raise the hand, and then please ask your question now, or else I can direct the questions in the chat box to the speaker.
Lekha,
yeah, okay.
If you
yeah,
can.
okay. May I direct the questions to you, Professor Wijayatunga?
That
yeah,
would be
okay.
great.
So, so it says, the first is Engineer Chamila Jayasekara asking, what would be the level of R&D a country like Sri Lanka needs to get involved in this process?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer, actually, because we should not be reinventing the wheels. Because when others have already done certain bit of research, we don't have to repeat it. Countries like us may not have a lot of money to spend on research and development, but then we need to spend on appropriate research and development. For instance, if you take the electricity power network, for instance, how to improve the flexibility in this power network, that's very country specific sometimes. And so we need to spend money on that kind of research and development. I cannot come up with a ballpark figure how much we have to spend, but the important thing is that identify the problems and see how we can locally solve those problems and spend money on it, not for the sake of doing research, any kind of research as such. So we have to spend on, in that sense, on applied research. But at the same time, of course, you may have research you have to do on very specific innovation. That, of course, I don't say that we should not be doing, but that we may not be able to do spend much on it as a country when the others are doing much more. So I cannot come up with a ballpark figure, but you have to spend money on R&D specific to Sri Lanka.
Yes, thank you. The next two question, actually, I put it in the chat box, but anyway, I will just ask you, what can we do to change the behavior of people? I mean, it's very difficult. It's will the education and awareness be enough to, change the behavior of our people? And also, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I know it's not that easy, but it's only through repetitive punching and keep creating awareness. In that sense, media has a big role to play, and rather than splashing out all the murders and suicides on the newspapers. More important thing is to emphasize these things. So media has a huge role to play in that sense. And I always used to say that the media can completely change people as the time goes by without even feeling it. And so media awareness campaigns will have a major role to play. That's the only way you can change the behavior of people. Otherwise, it's not that easy. As individuals, you may not be able to do that unless you keep on punching the message. Yeah.
So is there a strategy, or is there a action taken to change the media at least?
Yeah, we ourselves as energy people in the energy sector will have to do it. Actually, sometimes international financing institutions, when we try to do certain things, we have media campaigns. Particularly, if you can remember right, I mean, some time ago when compact fluorescent lamps were brought in 90s, you may not remember. And there was a huge media campaign to popularize it. Now you look at all these households, all wherever you go, you have compact fluorescent lamps or LEDs now, right? And you don't have to tell people go and buy an LED. You just go and buy an LED by yourself. Hardly people buy incandescent lamps if they are available still. And so it's only through that kind of awareness campaign you can do it. I think we spend, as international financing institutions, we spend this kind of money when it comes to very specific interventions. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And you said, I mean, we need to increase the share on nuclear power. Isn't it a sinking technology now?
Yeah, I didn't really say that. Probably it was misunderstood. No, we will not. I mean, for instance, international financing institutions do not finance any nuclear power plants, not because we discount it. The nuclear has a big role to play bringing down GHG emissions, as you know, but nuclear power. But it's only with a certain number of or limited number of countries, and therefore international interventions like us may not be required. But of course, you have to think of waste disposal and the discipline required to run a nuclear power station. And all that is necessary if you are going to have a nuclear power station in your backyard. So you have arguments on both sides, and I am not in either side anyway.
Yeah. My feeling is it's all emotional area, I think, on nuclear power.
Yeah.
Okay. So then Lakshan Disanayaka is asking, is adopting green technologies at the initiation of an industry a practical scenario for a country like Sri Lanka? Would it be more sensible to shift into these greener paths as a business progresses? Are the capital costs at the initiation associated with these larger than conventional approaches?
Yeah, overall, I mean, as I said, when it comes to industries, it's not that easy. We always say it's very hard to decarbonize. Sector is the industrial sector. It's not that easy, but eventually, if electricity can take over most of the industrial processes, then it's easier to generate electricity with green sources. So it should be a gradual process. You cannot do this overnight. And as I say, some of the industrial processes, you may not be able to avoid fossil fuels at all, and then you may have to combine that with some kind of decarbonizing technology like CCUS, or carbon capture and storage, which is still not economically viable at the moment. So it's not easy, but it does not mean that we should stop thinking about it. And so even in a country like Sri Lanka, it may not be seen practical, but it may be practical if you really put your heads down and then try to find a solution. And you may not be able to generate green electricity in the industrial site you are talking about, but then you can buy green energy from somewhere. So you have to find ways and means of doing it. It's possible if you have the will.
Then Ainkaran, I hope I spelled the name correctly. He's asking, we get a plethora number of renewable cleaner energy sources like solar, wind and hydro. Considering the electrical energy mix of Sri Lanka, still we see a considerable amount of non-renewable source usage for energy production. My question is there a proper criteria being adhered by experts when selecting the appropriate renewable energy source to be applied to a region? If so, what are the checks done, scrutinized under such criteria? In case of a nuclear plant, investment in Sri Lanka won't the nuclear waste treatment be a problem? That I think you already answered. But anyway, the other one, I hope you got the question. May I repeat it?
Yeah. No, fine.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, eventually, when you do a plan, you have always an objective function, right? And you try to minimize the the cost of the objective function. That's what you try to do. So depending on what your objective function is, you will end up with a plan. So, I mean, if you are looking at only the economic costs, you put in all these power plants into it, and then eventually you come up with a plan, which is a mix of all these different generation technologies. Then it depends on what the costs are going to be, and so on and so forth within it. And then if you put in the environmental costs into it, it's a different solution. So there are ways and means of doing it. It's all it depends on how you would like to adapt it. I'll give you one example. Now, in the new energy policy, and in fact, in the economic analysis of all ADB finance projects, it is a must that you include social cost of carbon into the economic analysis. What is social cost of carbon? It is the cost of carbon dioxide emissions in the project, and that will have to be internalized when it comes to looking at economic rate of return. If it is below the threshold, below the break-even point, you cannot finance that kind of a project. So then what it means is that we are considering GHG emissions seriously in those decisions. So such interventions can happen individually in these countries. Depending on that, you end up with whatever plan you have, then you will end up with implementing that plan. So increasingly in the future, you will have such social costs coming into this objective function more and more. And as I said, we will be, whether we like it or not, we will be compelled to bring in those social costs of carbon, not only a number, but the number will have to escalate as the time goes by. Just to give you an example, at the moment that number is $40 a ton of carbon. And that's a huge number to deal with. So as far as nuclear power plant investment is concerned, yes, nuclear waste is always a problem, not only for Sri Lanka, but the whole world. It's a problem, nuclear waste. And how to deal with nuclear waste, that's what determines whether you can have a nuclear power plant or not. Of course, now we have modular, smaller type of nuclear power plants around, and the nuclear waste is not a big volume, as you know, compared to the amount of power generated. But then you have to deal with even with these small volumes of nuclear waste. And how to deal with it, don't ask me. And that's not going to be easy. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Engineer Nimal Pereira is asking, according to the global emission figures, one of the main contributors is transport sector. What will be the role of hydrogen in bringing transport sector, especially mass transport and logistic transport, towards zero emission, and what are the strong initiatives globally towards such target?
Yeah, you are right, Nimal. I think it's a very pertinent question because particularly if you are talking of moving transport to a greener zone, you really need to think of hydrogen, because heavy vehicle cannot rely on electricity as the means of transport. For transport sector is a big culprit, so you have to really move transport sector into the green area. And hydrogen will have a huge role to play. And in fact, there are a lot of work going on in developed countries on hydrogen. And in fact, even in this region, India has a major initiative on hydrogen interventions. And even countries like Bhutan and other countries are trying to bringing hydrogen because they have enough renewable energy sources then which can be converted into hydrogen and then store and use it. So it has a big role to play. At the moment, of course, it is costly, but as the time goes by, I'm sure it will happen. It will be very similar to what happened to solar PV. Now look at solar PV, the cost reductions, and eventually, hopefully, because of the requirements in the transport sector, hydrogen will have a major role to play, and a lot of work is going on at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I hope I have more time, right? It's at 8:17. At what time you want to?
I'm fine. I'm at home.
Okay,
okay. Yeah, working from home.
Okay, then the other question: what is currently Sri Lanka's view on geothermal and or enhanced geothermal as part of the energy mix?
Probably this question I have to ask you, being most of you being Sri Lankan, because I haven't been in the Sri Lanka energy sector to that level that long, recently. But I'm not sure we have a lot of geothermal resources in Sri Lanka. I know there was some work somewhere down south and then in the eastern coast. If there are opportunities, obviously that would be great. But then you have to look at the cost of bringing this geothermal into the energy mix at the end of the day. Usually geothermal is quite feasible in places where you have volcanic activities, and Sri Lanka is not in that zone. And so beyond that, I'm not trying to be an expert in geothermal because it's more of a geological activity.
Okay, Wijayatunga, it's I think there's a connectivity issue again. Can others hear me? It looks like
we can hear you.
Yeah, but I think Dr. Wijayatunga is well. I think Dr. Wijayatunga disconnected from the connection. Do I have the liberty to, stop the or wind up the session?
No, he reconnected.
I can't say. Professor Wijayatunga?
I am here, yes.
Sorry. Yeah, okay, I'm so sorry.
No, I think something went wrong. Yeah,
yeah, because it stopped. Yeah. Then there's another. There are thank yous and appreciations, and then Mr. Jayamaha says we must educate our young generation, making aware of them from the very early age. It is the duty of parents and teachers. Then Engineer Nimal Pereira again asking, rather than focusing on a single or few sources of energy for Sri Lanka, why not to go for multiple R resources with smart tech supported real-time dynamic system?
Yeah, that's very good. No, that's how we should move. We should find solutions which are affordable and cleaner. And so I cannot discount any of these, applications or any of these, I must say, configurations in that sense. Yes.
Yeah, then Professor Ajit always is asking, there was a presentation recently which indicated that free cost of energy is possible by 2035. Levelized cost of electricity from renewable were given to come down sharply. Within brackets, it says Professor Ravi Silva's recent presentation. Now, this is the second time we are hearing free electricity, earlier being nuclear. What do you think of this scenario? What is ADB's view on biogas as energy source? Unlike solar and wind, biogas is dispatchable.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Frankly speaking, coming from international financing institution, I don't think we can think of free electricity at the moment. We are in fact fighting against free electricity because they are not free, and giving it free will basically make utilities bankrupt, and we'll end up with bigger problems. When the utilities are bankrupt, it's a problem for the whole country, not just the utilities. You think that when electricity board is bankrupt, we are fine. I mean, it's their problem, but it is our problem. So I don't think we will get free electricity. Free electricity may be operational cost may be free when it comes to most of the renewable energy sources, but you have to invest in upfront in huge capital investments you have. So levelized cost will not be zero for times to come. I don't think it will happen, and that's practically, I don't think that's correct. And but of course there may be certain assumptions behind Professor Ravi Silva's presentation, I'm sure. And so nuclear, yeah, nuclear almost free because it gives a lot of energy with a very small amount of uranium. But the problem is you have to spend a lot of money on capital investment, and that will have to be recovered. So it's not going to be free. Then you have to deal with nuclear waste. It's not going to be free. ADB's view on biogas. Yes, biogas is very important, particularly in the context of waste to energy power plants. And I couldn't tell you when it comes to waste to energy. ADB will support waste to energy, provided incineration is the last resort. We have to look at recycling, reuse, and biogas is one of the things what we emphasize, and only after exploiting all these different things that we have to go for incineration, and we are quite positive towards biogas, and then, as you quite rightly said, unlike others, biomass are dispatchable because it is a fuel which you can use when you want to use it, and therefore it is dispatchable. Yes.
Yeah, then Mr. Harsha Wickramasinghe is asking, do you think Sri Lanka's energy policy is in alignment with the ADB's energy policy?
Probably, it all depends on interpretation, how you interpret it. But as I told you, ADB energy policy clearly, says that no coal and gas only if you can justify. Actually, when it comes to gas, you have to make sure that you don't have any other economically, financially viable source which is cleaner to provide the same energy services. So I think we are aligned more or less. And unless Sri Lanka, I can't remember Sri Lankan energy policy whether it talks about coal. But in principle, I don't think there is a big difference. Yes.
Yeah, then Professor Ajit Diallo is again asking ADB's ETM, any chance of making Norachole run on RDFs? Such conversion as a funded project to Sri Lanka.
Actually, energy transition mechanism is, we are seriously looking at it. We have already got some commitments from Japan and some others for a fund, and there will be philanthropists contributing to it. So there will be a fund which can, invest in existing coal power plants to decommission, and probably may not be immediately, but in the future, Sri Lanka may be one of the beneficiaries. At the moment, of course, we are going to pilot test this in the Philippines and in Indonesia, and hopefully Vietnam will be another one. But Sri Lanka can be a beneficiary. You have to keep an eye on this and see whether we can get that. And so now I can see Somatilaka's question. Are you discontinuing? No,
Yeah.
no. We are not discontinuing support for LNG. As I said, under certain circumstances, we can continue to support natural gas. But what I'm trying to say is that the time is ticking, even for natural gas and other fossil fuels. No, we will support. We will support because Sri Lanka at the moment are trying to move away from coal and go towards natural gas. So that's a good way to justify our support. But don't expect this support to go continuously without any hindrance in the future. We will have restrictions, we will have difficulties, but we will, at the moment, we will definitely support because we want Sri Lanka to move away from coal and to cleaner fuels. It may not be happening overnight, therefore we need to have the transitional fuel. Yes.
Okay, Professor Wijayatunga, I can't see any more questions in the chat box, but if anybody wants to get anything clear, there's one more coming in. ADB, any investment in energy storage system?
At the moment, we have not, but I think my colleague from South Asia Energy Division, I'm no longer South Asia Energy Division, as you know, I am now, at a different level. But my colleagues in South Asia Energy is looking at some grant funding from JFJCM or what is called Japanese Fund for Joint Crediting Mechanism to put up a larger scale storage system as probably as a pilot to see how it's required and how it's going to perform in the Sri Lanka system. That means that may be a starting point to provide more investments in the future. So yeah, we are looking at it, these new technologies.
Yeah, okay. Just for my curiosity, may I ask one question? I mean, you said electric vehicles need to be popularized, but at the start it was very popular, but now I think it's gone down. So will that be a possible task to take it up again?
Yes, of course, electric vehicle is an important, as I said, it's important. Now, if you take a decision to buy a vehicle today, you must think twice before you buy a vehicle with internal combustion engine. Of course, hybrid vehicles may be useful, but electric vehicles may be even better. And in fact, to tell you, I mean, in India, we have a huge program to popularize electric vehicles, and in fact, ADB funds that. And all the government vehicles they are trying to convert to electric. They are really going ahead with it. and Sri Lanka can do the same thing. And then, institutions like ADB can easily support for that transition.
Okay.
And then I see Ajit's,
Yeah.
maybe the investment for the Badla solar park. Yes, Badla solar power park actually initially ADB came in to support. Maybe I can't remember, $200-300 million to start investing in the infrastructure required and the put in the plans and everything else to Badla Park. And then, of course, private sector picked up from there. So we provided initial investments. In fact, Badla Park really started off the concept of solar park and renewable energy parks, and we supported it in I think 2011 or so, some time ago. And then private sector picked up. So this is what exactly we should be doing. We should basically provide use sovereign money, like what comes from Asian Development Bank and the government and so on, to improve the infrastructure needed to bring in private sector investments in areas where private can invest in, for instance, solar, and create that enabling environment. So that's what we did in Badla Park. That's what we do in most of the interventions in India, and that's what we're trying to do here too. And if possible, as much as possible, that's what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, there's another question when I thought of discontinuing. As a country, we have many agricultural waste and biomass which can be converted to biofuels using gasification and pyrolysis, etc. Also, electrification of our railway system.
Yeah,
it's kind of a comment. Okay.
yeah. Thanks. I mean, again, we have to be careful of the scale and what can be done. But these are all accepted technologies for sure. Again, to tell you, we are supporting India for a biofuel program. They are quite keen, particularly as you know, they have a major issue in relation to air pollution in Delhi and suburbs because of burning of straw and so on during the harvesting season. And to overcome that issue, they are trying to use to bring in a biofuel program, and we are trying to help them in that. So obviously we have a role to play here, and this can be one of the areas where we can concentrate on. Thank you.
Okay, then shall we wind up? I mean, it's 8:30, and I think it's not enough. Actually, it's only 1 hour because we lost half an hour because it's personally, it's not enough for me. I like to listen to more insights anyway. But it looks like that there are no more questions also. So we'll get you again into the platform once again. I mean, when we develop this EUSL-Energy program, and then we can see what are the new trends or new technologies or whatever that we can work together with these new policies and all.
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, I am more than happy to provide whatever small contributions I can make.
Of course, yes. That's great to hear anyway. So it's thank you very much for all the participants who actively participate in the discussion. I think earlier there were a lot of members, but now maybe because of the time limitation, some people have left. Anyway, so on behalf of EUSL-Energy program and the Open University of Sri Lanka, the Mechanical Engineering Department, also the section C of SLAS, I would like to thank Professor Wijayatunga for spending his valuable time here, even though working from home. I mean, during nights or during this time, it's very difficult, I know, because it's we are all human, right? We need to have kind of rest also. But then thank you very much again. It was really, really interesting because personally for me, as I said earlier also, I think we can get you back into the platform once again to hear to more things. And so again, I like to thank on behalf of all entities I mentioned. Thank you very much, Professor Wijayatunga, and thank you very much all the participants also. Good night and have a good night also.
Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.